Ed Sullivan stood outside Judy Garland's dressing room, listening to the sound of someone sobbing, and he knew before opening the door that tonight was going to be a disaster. It was December 1963, and Judy Garland was scheduled to perform in exactly 20 minutes. She was 41 years old, had been a star since she was a teenager, and was now so broken by pills and alcohol and the machinery of Hollywood that barely functioned most days. Ed had heard the stories, had watched Judy spiral for years, but he'd booked her anyway because Judy Garland, even damaged, still brought ratings. But now, standing outside that dressing room listening to her cry, Ed understood that he was about to participate in something cruel. He was about to put a woman who could barely stand onto live television in front of 50 million people, and he was going to do it because that's what the show required. Ed pushed open the door. Judy was sitting on the floor in her performance gown, makeup running down her face. A bottle of pills spilled across the carpet beside her. She looked up at Ed with eyes that were simultaneously pleading and dead. "I can't do it, Ed. I can't go out there. I'm too tired. I'm so tired." And Ed Sullivan, who had spent 20 years putting performers on stage no matter what their personal problems were, had to decide whether tonight was the night he finally said no. Before we dive into this incredible story, hit that subscribe button because what you're about to witness is the moment when Ed Sullivan had to choose between the show that had defined his career and the humanity of a woman who was dying right in front of him. To understand why Judy Garland was sobbing on her dressing room floor in December 1963, you need to understand what Hollywood had systematically done to her over 25 years. How an industry had taken a talented child and turned her into a pharmaceutical experiment that ended in tragedy. Judy had been discovered as a child performer and signed to MGM Studios at age 13. The studio executives had looked at this young girl with the extraordinary voice and seen nothing but profit potential. They'd put her on camera immediately, working her 18-hour days, demanding perfection in every take, treating her not as a child but as a product that needed to perform. When young Judy couldn't maintain the energy levels required for those brutal shooting schedules, the studio doctors had a solution: amphetamines. Speed pills to keep her awake, alert, performing through exhaustion. When the amphetamines made it impossible for Judy to sleep, the studio had another solution: barbiturates. Sleeping pills to force her body into rest so she could wake up and do it all again. By the time Judy was 16 years old, she was addicted to prescription drugs that MGM's own doctors had given her. By 18, she was trapped in a cycle of uppers to work and downers to sleep that would define and ultimately end her life. By 20, she was already experiencing the health problems and psychological damage that came from years of chemical dependency. The pattern continued for decades. Multiple marriages and divorces, each relationship strained and ultimately destroyed by Judy's addiction and the trauma it created. Multiple suicide attempts, cries for help that were ignored or minimized by an industry that needed her to keep performing. Multiple career collapses where Judy would become too unreliable to work, followed by resurrections where desperation for money would force her back onto stages and in front of cameras. By 41, in December 1963, Judy Garland was a walking ghost of the girl who'd sung Over the Rainbow in The Wizard of Oz. The voice that had once been pure and powerful was damaged by years of abuse. The face that had been young and hopeful was lined and tired. The spirit that had once sparkled with genuine joy was crushed under the weight of addiction and the knowledge that she'd been used and discarded by people who'd claimed to care about her. Ed Sullivan had known Judy for years, had booked her on his show multiple times throughout the 1950s and early 1960s, had watched her show up drunk, show up high, show up barely able to stand, and every time, Ed had put her on stage anyway. Because Judy Garland, even at 50%, was still better than most performers at their best. Because audiences loved her. Because ratings spiked whenever she appeared. But Ed had also watched Judy get worse, had seen the addiction tighten its grip, had heard the stories of Judy passing out in hotel rooms, of Judy being found unconscious, of Judy attempting suicide again and again, and Ed had told himself that it wasn't his responsibility, that Judy was an adult making her own choices, that putting her on television wasn't enabling her destruction, it was just giving her opportunities to work. Now standing in her dressing room looking at her crying on the floor, Ed couldn't lie to himself anymore. "Judy, what happened?" Ed kept his voice gentle, kneeling down beside her. Judy looked at him with eyes that seemed to see right through him, past all the professional distance and careful neutrality, straight to the truth. I took some pills to calm my nerves before the show, but then I couldn't remember if I'd already taken them, so I took more. And then I took more because the first ones weren't working fast enough. I don't remember anymore, Ed. I don't remember how many I'm supposed to take, or how many I've already taken, or if I took any at all. It's all just pills and trying to get through the next 5 minutes without falling apart completely. Ed saw the prescription bottle on the floor next to her, picked it up with hands that were shaking slightly. Read the label, barbiturates, prescribed to Judy Garland by a doctor Ed had never heard of, dated from last week but already almost empty. The bottle should have contained 30 pills. There were maybe 5 left. Judy, how many of these did you take today? I don't know, Judy said, and her voice broke completely on the words. I stopped counting years ago, Ed. I just take them until I stop feeling. And I never quite stop feeling, so I just keep taking them. Does that answer your question? Ed felt something cold settle in his chest. This wasn't recreational drug use. This wasn't even addiction in the conventional sense. This was someone using pills to commit slow suicide while maintaining enough consciousness to keep performing. Judy, when was the last time you ate anything? Judy looked at him like the question didn't make sense. I don't remember. Yesterday? The day before? Food makes me feel sick. The pills make me feel sick. Everything makes me feel sick. But the pills at least make me not care that I feel sick. Ed made a decision that he knew would have consequences. You're not performing tonight. Judy grabbed his arm with surprising strength, her fingers digging in hard enough to hurt. Ed, please. I need this. I need the money desperately. I owe everyone. The IRS is threatening to seize what little I have left. My lawyers are demanding payment. My ex-husbands are taking me to court. If I don't perform tonight, if I don't get paid, I lose everything. They'll take my house. They'll take everything. You're going to lose your life, Ed said quietly, and he realized as he said it that he'd known this was coming for years and had done nothing. Look at yourself, Judy. You're sitting on a dressing room floor with pills spilled around you, and you can't remember taking them. I cannot put you on that stage like this. I won't do it. You've put me on stage worse than this, Judy said, and there was an edge of bitterness cutting through the tears and the slurred speech. You've put me on when I was so drunk I could barely remember the lyrics to songs I've sung 1,000 times. When I was so high on amphetamines that I was talking too fast for anyone to understand me. When I could hardly walk from the wings to the microphone without holding on to something. You didn't care then about my well-being. You cared about your ratings. Why do you suddenly care now? Ed? What's different about tonight? The question hit Ed like a physical blow. Because she was right. He had put her on stage in terrible condition before, had watched her struggle through performances, had seen her barely make it through songs, had known she was destroying herself, and had done nothing except collect the ratings. I was wrong, Ed said. Every time I did that, I was wrong. I told myself it wasn't my responsibility, that you were an adult making your own choices. But that was a lie. I enabled this. I helped you destroy yourself because it was good for my show. Judy's expression softened slightly. Ed, it's not your fault. I was destroying myself long before I met you. MGM started it when I was 13. Every studio, every producer, every person who gave me pills and told me to perform, you're just one more person in a very long line. That doesn't make it right, Ed said. He stood up, walked to the door, called for his stage manager. Cancel Judy's segment. Tell the audience she's ill. Find someone else to fill the time. Judy started crying again. Ed, please. I need this money. I need this job. Ed knelt back down beside her. Judy, you need help. Real help. Not another performance. Not another chance to pretend everything's fine when it's not fine. The stage manager appeared at the door. Ed, we're 12 minutes from airtime. What do you want me to do? Ed looked at the stage manager, then back at Judy. Get an ambulance. Quietly. Bring it to the back entrance. Tell them we have someone who's taken too many pills. Judy's eyes widened. Ed, no. If the press finds out, the press is going to find out eventually, Ed said. Either they'll find out you went to the hospital tonight, or they'll find out you died. Those are the only 2 options left, Judy. And I'm not going to stand by and let you die just to protect your image. The ambulance came 20 minutes later. Judy was taken to a private hospital where doctors treated her for a barbiturate overdose. The press did find out, and the headlines were brutal. Judy Garland hospitalized, Mrs. Ed Sullivan show performance. Another crisis for troubled star. CBS executives called Ed the next morning, furious. "You canceled Judy Garland? Do you know how much ad revenue we lost? Do you know how many viewers tuned in specifically to see her?" Ed's response was simple. "Judy Garland almost died in my dressing room. I called an ambulance instead of putting her on stage. If that costs me my show, I can live with that." The executives backed down, but the damage to Ed's relationship with CBS was real. They saw it as Ed prioritizing a performer's well-being over the network's interests. Ed saw it as finally doing something he should have done years earlier. Judy survived the overdose. She checked herself into rehab, got clean for a few months, then relapsed again. The cycle continued for the rest of her life. Pills, alcohol, attempts at recovery, relapses. In June 1969, just 5.5 years after the Ed Sullivan incident, Judy Garland died of a barbiturate overdose in London. She was 47 years old. Ed Sullivan died in 1974, 5 years after Judy. In one of his final interviews, he was asked about his biggest regrets. "Judy Garland," he said immediately. "Not the night I sent her to the hospital. That's the one thing I did right. My regret is all the times before that. All the times I put her on my stage when she was barely functional. I told myself it was giving her opportunities. But really I was using her talent while ignoring her suffering. I was part of the machine that killed her." The interviewer pressed, "But you saved her life that night in December 1963. Ed shook his head. "I delayed her death. That's not the same as saving her life. Saving her life would have meant refusing to enable her addiction years earlier. Would have meant telling her she couldn't perform on my show until she got real help. But I didn't do that, because her problems were profitable for me, and I'll have to live with that." Liza Minnelli, Judy's daughter, spoke about that December 1963 night in a later interview. "Ed Sullivan called an ambulance for my mother, when he could have just put her on stage and collected his ratings. That bought her 5 more years of life. 5 more years that I got to have with her. I'll always be grateful to Ed for that. He finally did the right thing, even though it was late. Better late than never." If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button. Ed Sullivan found Judy Garland overdosing in her dressing room and had to choose between the show and her life. Have you ever had to choose between what was profitable and what was right? Share your story in the comments below.